Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to the 1904 Club, of course, the Hull City podcast from the Hull Daily Mail. And we are building up to the Wembley final against Southampton, we think, although everything is up in the air. I'm delighted to say we've got some special guests today. Not only Burnsy and Kathryn, but Phil Brown is with us. Phil, how are you?
I'm fantastic, especially after Monday night, because I'm telling you, that was a job very well done. I'm calling everybody that was there brave. I'm calling Mike White brave, because somebody took a swing at him in the box and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. We're sitting right behind the director's box at Millwall, and everybody knows what Millwall's like. But I really think since Steve Kavanagh, I don't know if you know the inside information, I've known Steve Kavanagh, who was chief executive of Millwall for a number of years, but he left Southend and he was my chief executive. What a good man, you know, and he tried to turn Millwall into a more respectful club. Is that the best word I can use? Respectful club. You know, all the off-field activities that Millwall are famed for. He was trying to work it into a club that could be accepted in the Premier League, say, for instance. And that's what we witnessed on Monday night. It was almost like going back into the 70s, 1970s, when I supported Sunderland, and you're walking through a tirade of abuse, first and foremost, when you're parking your car, but then you're thinking, is the car safe? And all of that rubbish is going on in your head. Then you come through a line of probably would have been about 1,500 to 2,000 police, and I thought it's back to the 70s. It really is. It was like it was phenomenal. Then full house, both ends, and then a game of football to die for. It was a proper game of football. I was absolutely. I've been to some games of football, and I've managed and I've coached and I've played. That was really, really on the money, is how I would describe that game on Monday night.
Kathryn,
I was just going to say, what impressed you most about City, Phil?
The change. First and foremost, the change when I'm in the press box and I'm trying to weigh up this information that's coming to me, that there's two changes and the change in formation. I watched the game on the Friday and I thought it was quite simply, it was a poor performance. I think Hull were lucky to come out of it 0-0. In fact, it was they've crossed the hurdle there. They've jumped, they swam the whatever. I thought they've come out with it on top because of the fact it was 0-0, and he could work on the training ground. And I got told by Arjun in the press box that he came to work the following day, and none of the players, just the manager, came to work the following day, and he was 5 hours thinking about football. That's my life, that's I knew exactly where he was at, but he wanted to be on his own in the training ground, and he was there, and Arjun joined him for an hour or whatever it was, and I said, is the discussion about football when you're speaking to your manager? Is it about football? Is it about tactics? Is it about individuals? Is it about changing formation? Is it any of that? And he went, no. He said, just level of support. It reminded me of my days with Paul Duffin. But 5 hours at the training ground on your own is not the end of the world for a manager. You're living and breathing the football club, and you want people to understand that you go through that for one reason only. You're going to try and get a group of players the following day, which was the Sunday. You're going to try and get the group of players to all agree that this is the way to play and this is the way we're going to play. And when you've got that buy-in, which you clearly had, I thought the performance was about clarity. It was about a group of players that were, probably thinking, we're lucky to get away with that on Friday. Now, this is what we really look like. And I thought, if that's what Hull City really look like, it doesn't matter who you're playing at Wembley. You bring that to the party, it's Premier League all day long.
Kathryn, we were obviously talking on the pod yesterday with Prutz as well about how well City played. You were in the away end. Just talk to Phil about kind of your perspective of what you saw and what he's just said.
Yeah, I think we always kind of felt like the second leg would actually playing that away from home would suit us better, because we have been pretty good away from home all season. And it was just about getting through the early parts of the game, getting to half time and not being a goal down. And, we had a couple of chances first half. We weathered a storm from them a little bit, like a small period that they had. And then it was about trying to take the game to them second half, which is what we did. And I said on the podcast yesterday when we scored the first goal, my Whoop band told me that my heart rate reached 202 beats per minute. It's quite concerning. But
try being a manager, Kath.
No, yeah.
Try being a manager.
Sergei's was probably quite similar if he has one, but yeah, it for some reason. I mean, I'm never kind of not nervous, even when it was 2-0 and we looked comfortable and fans were singing about going to Wembley and they were singing More by the Tigers. I couldn't join in because until it was, I've watched too many games of like York and Rochdale and last minute goals, and I just thought until it's a minute from full time, I can't quite settle. But it was one of the best away ends I've ever been in, I think.
Brownie, how impressed were you with the start? Because we all knew that Millwall we thought that Millwall were going to come out like a house on fire with the crowd and everything, but City met fire with fire almost. And I know that Millwall had that spell after 17 minutes and probably for 10-15 minutes where they were putting crosses in. There were a couple of scrambles. The goalkeeper made a couple of saves. Let's be fair, you'd expect him to make, but the way they started the game, it kind of set the tone, didn't it? For we're here, we mean business. We're not going to roll over and let you walk all over us. We're here to do a job.
Barry, the modern day game now is defined by the ball. Who has the ability to hold possession in areas where sometimes you go, what are we playing football there for? And it has been questionable over the years that a lot of teams try to play football in the wrong areas and they're not capable of doing it. But when you get a team that is capable of it, that's the reason why you're doing it. You're trying to lead people onto you. Now, when you play 3 centre-backs instead of 2, so you go from a 4 to a 5, or you go from 2 centre-backs to 3 centre-backs, whichever the case may be, what you're trying to do is entice. Say if we just talk about numbers, not the numbers that were out there, and I've got them in front of me, don't get me wrong, but when you're looking at the 9, who we knew was Josh Coburn, then you've got the 7, which was Ballo, and the 11, which was Aziz, and they're inverted, if you want to call them that way. You actually, if you bring them onto your centre halves, it allows space for your wing backs. And I'm not trying to be tactically brilliant here. It's just simple stuff for me. But if you don't bring them on, they then occupy the wing backs. Then the 3 centre backs are against 1 striker. So if you understand this one, this is the best part. I thought it was 3-on-2 in the middle of the park on Friday night, and that's the reason why Hull City got in a bit of a tiz, was that they lost the possession statistics or the stronghold of midfield. And a lot of people make reference, even in Sunday League football, that say, win the midfield battle, you win the game. Sometimes you agree with that. Other times it's a numerical advantage. And if that numerical advantage was the number 10 with 2 6s, then Hull have got to try and find a way. Now, bringing him onto you, at number 10, onto a centre-half, the centre-half has to realise that if it is the number 10 comes onto you and not the 7 and the 11, he's got to realise who's available then.
Yeah.
Now that sounds like rocket science to a certain extent, but it's not. So if it's the 7 and the 11 come on, you're 2 and you're 3, and literally you have got Ryan, Giles and Coyley. You've got the 2 and the 3 who are wing backs that can filter off or flatten off and become readily available, and they can take the game up to the opposing's final third if you want. I think that's why Hull City dominated that first 15 minutes. They recognised who was closing them down and they recognised who to pass the ball to. Does that sound like rocket science? No. Does that sound like professional football? Well, you should all understand that part is what you work out on a training ground. It's as simple as it gets. And I think that's what Sergei has done. He's formulated the plan on Saturday from a poor performance on Friday. He's put it together, the pieces of the jigsaw on the Sunday with he was sort of you condone that, you give it to the players and see what comes back. And if they're buying in, you've got to run with it. If they're not buying in, you've got to work out who's questioning it. And is it a lack of ability that is questioning it for? He doesn't really want the ball at the back. When you've got John Egan in the middle of the 3, wow. All day long, I'd have been playing 3 centre-backs all season. Don't get me wrong. You've got to have the ability to change these days, certainly in the Championship, because there's so many tactically aware players, as well as coaching, as well as management. There's so many tactically aware players, and I think John Egan's one of the best. But for John to step in, he's one of the rare. He was doing it back in the day at Southend, and I'm like, whoa, what you doing? Yes, I'll go with that. Whoa, yes, I'll go with that. He plays a pass, and he follows the pass, and it sounds rockets. It's simple. He plays the pass and then follows it. He wants to score a goal. He goes back to playing football in the playground. That's a simple analogy. John was like, I'm playing centre half. I want to score a goal here. I thought that's what got the grip of the game in the first 15 minutes. Then they made changes tactically for 15 minutes, and they got to grips with it. But then, the moment when a player goes down injured, you replace him with a match winner who's been sitting on the bench, and he's been sitting on the bench but played on Friday in a poor performance. He's got like a point of proving, and these are all things that fell into place for Hull City and worked a treat on Monday night, to the counter of Millwall's tactical genius and Alex Neil. Alex made changes and they never worked, and he'll be kicking himself. He'll be booting himself, honestly, because that's what we do as coaches.
Just going back to you saying you run it past the players. Is that what you did with your City squads? And did they ever say, "Hold on, Gaffer, that's bobbins. That's not going to work"? Well,
Burnsy, we're salesmen. We really are, And you have to come in sometimes, and you don't run it by the players first. You run it by a backroom staff, and that's what I had. I had Steve Parkin, and God Almighty, one of the best managers before my time, best manager of Hull City, and Nobby would say the words that you just said. Are you joking? And you've got the sales pitch has got to go through your backroom staff. Then you get the buy-in from them. Then you walk into a room and you've got 6 on the stage, as it were, if you want to call it that, who are preparing analysts and whatever, preparing moments would make clear sense to the players there. Yeah, he's right there. Yeah, he's right there. Now you can sell them a duffin by just showing them the wrong clips, as it were, but you don't want to do that because you want to win the game of football. You want to try and elevate their belief in what you're saying first, and then works outside, and then you set it up again against an 11 against the kids. That's the way I used to play. That's the way I used to plan. It works. There's no doubt about it. When it doesn't work, sometimes you've underestimated the opposition, or they've made changes. But I've got to say it, Alex Neil would have been kicking himself because every change he made was it went against him when he put the second striker on. It went against him all of a sudden. I tell you, Crooksey's got to be the most underrated player in the Championship. When he goes in the Premier League next year, fingers crossed, hopefully that happens. You've got a starting midfield player there that can grace the Premier League without a shadow of a doubt. I was well impressed with him. I was well impressed with John Egan. I was well impressed with the goalkeeper. McBurney, you don't need to go overboard about because he does what he does. Will it be fit the Premier League? We don't know. So we'll have to wait and see. But I hope Sergio is doing exactly what I was saying to the Hull City players back in the day. I'm going to give everybody a chance because you've worked your tribe off to get there, and I ain't going to throw that away,
Kathryn, on it's a point that we sort of, that Phil's mentioned there, that we alluded to yesterday about City's recruitment over the last couple of years, and you think back to January of last year when John Egan was brought in from Burnley. He was sitting on Burnley's bench. He was brought straight into the City first team. He'd obviously had a nightmare with injury. Crooks was brought back from America. There can't have been too many better signings than Matt Crooks and Egan. Kathryn, if you want to take that, and then Phil, if you want to jump in on those two specifically.
Yeah, I think they're just experienced players, and they've been there and done it. I think with Egan, obviously, he's been promoted with Sheffield United. He's played in the Premier League, and Matt Crooks is just, I think Phil's right. He goes under the radar a little bit, but what he gives to that team, you can't kind of replace it. And I mean, we saw early this season when he was out injured for a little bit that there's nobody else in the squad that can do what he can do. One of my favourite things about the game on Monday was John Egan just like running. Because one watching the game, and she goes,
Kathryn, it's what I paid to do.
It's like, but I just sort of like, I thought, what is John Egan doing up there? How has he got up there? Why is he there? But it's like, it was brilliant because I don't, he's got such an engine for a centre half to get back and to get in position. And I think both of those players are players that have played through injuries this time, this season. They've put their body on the line, and you need players like that in your team if you're going to, be successful. And hopefully both of them get a good rest in the summer, after celebrating a promotion, because I think they absolutely deserve it.
Kathryn, it's all about move and counter move, though. It's when you see John Egan driving forward, I can see it from the touchline, obviously, and the coach's eye and this, that, and the other. But it's understanding that, and you've got to counterbalance that. You can't have Giles, Coyle, John Egan, and the midfield just vacating the space, just leaving the two at the back. But the two at the back can go 2 for 2. Ajayi and Hughes went under the radar to a certain extent because of John Egan's driving force. I thought them two just balanced that off quite nicely. And if you're a centre half, You know, gone are the days of the centre half where he needs a 2v1 situation or he needs a 3v2 situation. Modern day centre halves these days just stick with the 2v2 or the 1v1 situation on the halfway line. You've got the goalkeeper behind you, you've got offside on your side. There's lots of things in your advantage in that 1v1, but it's the pace of centre halves these days that allow everybody, and the belief in the footballers in front of them, that they allow them to go because they're going to 100% retain possession, that kind of thing. So the modern day game has moved on drastically to allow people to do them driving runs. But John just caught the eye because I would love to see his stats in terms of the running stats. I don't know if do the newspaper or the radio station, anybody, does any of the stats come out about the players?
Not in the Championship quite as much as in the Premier League.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, from the naked eye, the eye test, he was just everywhere, wasn't he?
It'd blow you away. It would blow you away. A centre half, you would expect a centre half to do 10k. I'm saying John Egan must have done 12, 13k, and that's a central midfield player. That's a Dean Marnie back in our day, who was a box-to-box man. I would then say Matt Crooks was probably 14, 15 kilometres because he was outstanding. Driving force. It was Millwall must have been looking at this guy going, you know, how did we manage to overrun these on Friday? That's what they must have been asking themselves. And I think because of Crooks and Slater in the middle of the park, I think that's the reason why Sergei has not gone blatantly obvious and went, okay, we're changing it to 3 centre halves, but we're going to go 3-5-2 to get the extra man in midfield. He's gone 3-4-3, and I think it's so positive. But it needs work. You can't just go from a 4-2-3-1 into a 3-4-3 and expect everybody to know what they're doing.
Yeah, and he's sort of left out the 10, hasn't he? He's not, because he's played with the 10 quite a lot in Gelhardt, and that was a big call because he's got 14 league goals this season.
Yeah,
dropping him to the bench and going without it, but it did work. The evidence was there.
Burnsy, I know as a journalist, so you're rubbing your hands because you've already got the question, haven't you? But when it goes the right way, you're celebrating. You're because you're a Hull City fan basically, but you're celebrating with the win. But you've got the question ready. If it goes pear-shaped, why did he drop Gelhardt? You know. So I know you've got to do that. That's your job. But as a coach, you've got to forget about what you've left out. It's what you're bringing in and the changes that you've made and work at that. And yeah, you've got to obviously put your arm around the disappointed ones. But they both came off the bench and responded, didn't they? So he's obviously a good man manager as well. So, you know, you've got both ends of the stick right, you know.
Well, he said
have you met him? Sorry,
no, I haven't. I haven't. I would like to meet him, and obviously I'll be at Wembley, but I'm not pushing that. He's got far more important things than me on the cards, you know.
He said at the start of the season, Brownie, that the squad would be important. You know, this is a guy that's never managed in the Championship, but he came straight in with, you know, we've got 46 games plus cup games. We're going to need everybody. And obviously they've had so many injury problems throughout the season, you know, that he's never once been able to name a fully fit side, let alone squad. And it's been true to form. He's used everybody at different points for the season. So that's how important is that as a manager, to keep everybody, even when the players are frustrated, they're not in the team. Gelhardt would have been, you know, Gelhardt, he said to me on Monday night, I wasn't happy not to be picked, but you know, I'm part of it. I know I'll play. Balumi was unhappy to be dropped after Friday night, the first leg, but he, you know, and he was. Yeah. I think he annoyed the manager when Carl Joseph got injured. He took ages to get his boots on. The manager was annoyed with him because they were down to 10 players right at the end of the first half. Yeah. But he keeps them engaged, and they know that when they come off the bench, they're going to make an impact.
It's brilliant. I'm just going. What came to mind there straight away, Barry, when you were talking, was two players that weren't even on the bench at Wembley when we got promoted, and that was JJ Okocha and Henrik Pedersen. And they were sitting suited and booted behind me, right behind me. And I've got a couple of pictures that I sometimes look at, you know, I make reference to when I'm standing out there. Oh, dear me, when you're in the technical area, away from the dugout, but the camera work is just brilliant sometimes. And they get the shot of the guy in the background or the guys in the background, and that could be Brian and Steve or whatever. But I always recognize them too because they're behind the dugout. You know, you're not actually in the dugout because you're not in the team. And they were brought in for specific reasons, you know, the ability to handle big games. And yeah, I've gone without them even on the bench. So squads are important. They're massively important. If you had said to me that, you know, from the Wembley game, that would be my team, you can never read it. That's the beauty of the game. I think it's a fantastic game, and Burnsy's a great one for questioning. Why is he left out, or what's he not playing for, or that and that's important as well, because at the end of the day, you've got to have the answers. If you haven't got the answers, then you go away from that press conference thinking to yourself, yeah, why is he not playing? He's got a point there. And I've had them discussions many times with backroom staff. Can you remember Sally? Sally used to be the PA at the football club, Sally. And I don't know what she's doing now, but I think she still lives in Hull. At least that's what I was told last time I was at the club. Bronwyn told me that. So anyway, long story short, Sally, many times on a Monday morning, the air would be boiling. It would be because me, Brian and Steve would be going at each other, either from the result at the weekend, or the performance, or the team selection, or the training, or what was wrong or what was right. And you'd go at each other, and it used to get really hot under the collar about 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. Sometimes training was 10:30 when we started, but sometimes it was 11:30, 12 o'clock, because we were still going at it, But you have to do that. You have to get to them moments, because your press conference will end up like that if you don't. Yeah. And once you've had that, I can be calm with Burnsy, because that question's been covered in my staff meeting. Do you know what I mean? So that's part and parcel of the management game, as far as I'm concerned. Having a good backroom staff that can be honest and forthright and understand where I'm at, whether it be emotionally unstable or aggressive or too calm or whatever. They've got to be able to understand that and why.
KB?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think we all saw kind of during Phil's reign him blow up on a touchline a few times, and we've seen Sergei do that as well. And I think I do kind of see some similarities between them, actually. With the passionate, how passionate they are, and how they connect with the fan base. I think that was the biggest thing of Phil's reign, was that he really kind of built up that connection with the fans, and that part of that came from keeping the club in the division the year before. And when Sergei came in, nobody really knew too much about him, but instantly he got the fans on side. And when you've got the fans on side, and when you've got the players on side, you've got a winning formula straight away there.
The manager's talked about. Look, he's had his sendings off this year. His coaching staff have had yellow cards. He was sent off at Leicester, so he was banned from the touchline at Charlton in the penultimate game. How key is that? Is sending that message to your players, particularly because he said to me again before the second leg at Millwall, discipline is so important. We need to keep 11 players on the pitch. But as a manager, I've also got to be calm. And he has, at Leicester, he showed his frustration after the penalty they got, and then the goal they scored shortly after that as well. And that is important, isn't it?
I served my time under one of the greatest managers, I think, in the modern day game. He turned the game from what it was, where a lot of changing rooms were governed by alcohol, and that's not being disrespectful of the 70s, 80s, or 90s. But then it went to super fit, superhuman technicians, and that's Sam Allardyce but the psychology of Sam Allardyce was the most important part, in my opinion. So serving my time under him, being on his right shoulder, left shoulder, in moments that were aggressive or intrusive, or you could just lose the plot. Sam would sometimes, in a quiet moment, pull me to one side and say, "There's a reason for that." Now, he wouldn't always. Be a performing chimp on the sideline. He wouldn't be doing that for any reason. When he blew up, when he actually went overboard, I could understand why, because of that kind of pressure that you're under as a manager. You're talking about 202. Sam was wired up, if you remember, with strange enough, it was Leicester City's manager at the time, and we were two managers were wired up for the benefit of the League Managers Association, to show people what the heart rates were like, and how people were going through the ceiling at times, and Sam's used to go up to close on 260, 270 during games, and it was almost going through a hard session of training in a gym for a guy his age without actually doing that hard session. So his heart was going up there as if he was on a treadmill or a bike, going hell for leather for an hour and a half. I mean, dear me, that's going to take its toll on the human mind, the body, the spirit, whatever. But he would often throw a curveball in that would take the pressure off the players. So the whole emphasis would be on, oh dear, what's happening there? And it would take all the viewing and all the insight or whatever that the game was going through, he would deflect it away from the players so that they would start playing without pressure. And that, for me, is a key to a great manager. Recognising that moment, understanding your players, understanding that they are under a lot of pressure and that they'll do strange things under pressure, red cards, etc., etc. But then, if you get a reputation for it, it's one of them where, oh no, here he goes again. You can't get that reputation. It has to happen every so often, but not commonplace. You know, if it's commonplace, people just take it as, oh, he's off again. But the pressure stays on the players. He deflects it from the players, and that's what he taught me to do as a young man. And I didn't do it deliberately. It was just natural to me.
And when you're preparing for a Wembley final, though, you know, look, there's not been a huge amount of pressure on City this season, of course. And even going into the playoffs, even the second leg, everybody was going, it's Millwall. Millwall finished 10 points clear of them. They're gonna show their quality. City, basically, all City have got no chance. But now you're in the final. You know, all those players know what is ahead now. It's there. It's always been the can's been kicked down the road, but now it's there. You're one game away from the Premier League. You're at Wembley. There's 90,000 people. You know, it's the biggest day of your life. How are you dealing with that, Brownie, as the manager? You know, inside for you, it's a huge occasion for you, your family, and everything. You're 90 minutes plus extra time away from being a Premier League manager, but you've got to be that calming influence for all your players, so they don't go out like a cat on hot bricks and get sent off in the first 5 seconds.
But it's the best moment of your life. You've got 2 weeks to prepare. You know, it's not Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday. You've done that part now. You know, you're 48 games in. And rightly so, where you are, and everybody tells you that's the best way to get promoted, but it's the worst place on the world if you don't get promoted, you know. So you've got all of them ifs, buts, and maybes going on, but his focus for the game on Monday night told me that this guy's in the right place, 100%, and more importantly, his players are. I thought he looked in the wrong place on Friday night, but you have a second bite at the cherry, you know. As a manager, sometimes you can't underestimate that. That's a free card, you know. It's a free entrance into a game, as it were. So you're coming back from a poor performance, but a 0-0 draw at home, but you're going into the Lions' den, literally. And he went in there with a calm, and Ajun was more agitated. You know, Ajun was doing the interview. Mike White asked him a couple of questions, and I'm straight in because I wanted to ask more than just a couple of questions. You know, you want to drill into the guy who's actually looking after the manager. Paul Duffin was outstanding for me. Outstanding, has to be said, you know. The relationship was priceless. And it was because of the intrusion. It was allowed, you know, many times that chairman will always say to me, and I've been at quite a few clubs, you know, where chairman maybe want to come into the change room. It's not the right place for them, you know. It's not the right place for them. There's games that can go on in the changing room that I can play him or his board off against them, and all of a sudden you've got the players on your side, and it can be a battle that way, or it can be, come on guys, this guy is doing, you know, he's doing more than required for to give us success for it. And when Paul Duffin was talking about, you know, going to the hotel, the Grove, and 3 days preparation with a football pitch there, and the players were looked after like kings, you know, the families were looked after like kings and queens, and the children, no stone was left unturned because of Paul Duffin's influence. And I think it looks like Sergei and Ajun have got that relationship, and to me, it's going to be Hull City's moment. And I don't care who's out there. They can be Southampton, they can be Middlesbrough, it can be this wave of idiocy. You know, the clouds that are coming down on Southampton. Do they descend on Hull? Sergei, he'll be keeping well away from that. He'll be focusing 100% on the game at Wembley and how to do it. How he prepares his players. The players have got the insight into how they can do what they want. You know, can they stay before? Can they stay after? Do they go away and spend time with their families for 3 or 4 days after the Millwall 2-legged affair? Because that was a battle. That was scars. It was people coming out there with, you know, injuries, long term, etc., etc. So they took a couple of hits. You know, do we get away from each other? I remember saying that after Watford two legs. We were at home the second leg, and I was saying to the players, let's get away from each other for 3 or 4 days. Players weren't having it. They wanted to be on top of each other. We were tight, you know. We were a changing room that wanted to be with each other, and that's no disrespect to families. They wanted to come into training, and I wanted to come into training. I wanted to come into work every day, and that's again no disrespect to my family, but that's my life, you know. I just love the game, and when you've got a changing room like that, that's your family, and you bring the families together, and we did all of that. And I'm sure they'll have their own way of. It sounds to me, the way the players were talking afterwards, the interviews, how tight they are, how together they are. And I saw there was a free kick in the second half. I don't know if you remember, where I think it was Charlie Hughes played a ball into the channel, just went out for a goal kick, and it was, I think it was John Egan. He was having a right pop at McBurney, and I'm thinking, I'm having that all day long, because the Millwall lads are looking at each other going, "Hold on a second, what's this?" They're 2-0 up, or they're 1-0 up, whatever the score was at the time. They're 2-0 up or 1-0 up, and they're absolutely digging each other out. But that is the beauty of, it's not good enough. Even though we're 1-0 up or we're 2-0 up, it's not good enough. We need to be better. We need to get better. We need to be on the same page. Honestly, they'll be in a wonderful place for 2 weeks until that whistle goes and the chaos descends from a game of football where you've got 40,000 of each sets of fans. And a glorious sunshine day, and you're going to lose probably with 6 kilos of weight. You know, I played at Wembley, and I played in 92 degrees Fahrenheit, obviously not centigrade. But I tell you what, you lose a lot of energy. You need to be at your best, physically, technically, tactically. You need to be at your best, and if you bring that to the party, you're in the Premier League.
What did you learn, maybe, about yourself and about the team, and the best way to prepare in that sort of time while you're waiting, while you're getting your tactical plan together, your selection together, and everything like that? What are the key things, Phil?
It teaches you more man management. It teaches you more how to understand that, you know, you've got a group of players there, could be 25, and, you know, by definition in them days it was, if I'm not mistaken, Burnsy, it was 11-5, was it? 5 subs. So we had 16 players that can play or be involved on the day, and 9 players will be sitting behind the dugout, which is not easy. You know, you're all suited and booted, and you've all been measured up for your suits, and everybody knows about the Wembley suits or track suits or whatever it is. And they're sitting there thinking, I'm not playing. That is the moment where you learn more about your man management skills, how to understand that if that was me, if you've never been a player, Burnsy, and you're there as a manager that's never been a player, you can cast them to one side. You know, you can, well, you know, I've got me 11 there. That's all I'm bothered about. The squad has got you there. The 25 have got you there. The ones who have probably got crutches, and, you know, there's all sorts of horrible issues that you've had all the way through the season. It learns you more about man management, understanding that kid's put his body on the line, and we're here because of that kid, and now he's not even sitting there. So you've got to understand that you can't just be talking to 11. You can't be talking to the 5 subs. I once I did it at Kidderminster Harriers, and I'm not too sure if it was the right move, but it was from my days at Hull that I brought this to the club, and all the players that I'd loaned out that weren't at the football club any longer, that they were playing elsewhere or whatever it was, or injured long term, I invited everybody to the overnight stay before the game, and we played at Southport, and it was Kidderminster away at Southport, and we needed to win the game to get automatic promotion. We draw the game, we've got to look at the teleprint, as it were. We lose the game, we've got no chance. So we go there, but I involved everybody. And for me, just at that moment in time when I was delivering a pre-match talk, I was realising the contribution was so few and little from 4 or 5 of them that I was wondering, why did I do that? But I liked the thought of the inclusion. You know what I mean? Whether you played one game or 46.
It's funny, as you were saying that, I'm thinking, I'm going to ask you, why did you do that? Because you presumably, people that you'd said, well, you're not good enough for me at the time, I'm letting you go out. You could be bringing in a bad vibe into your squad, couldn't you?
Yeah, but it was knowing the players, it wasn't a case of that. They were genuinely players that had came to me, knocked at my door, and just said, listen, I'm not on a bench, and I'm fit. I'm not on a bench, and I'm not playing. and it's been 5 games now. Come on, and genuinely, they went out on loan to come back if necessary, but then they've gone out on loan and been successful. I'm only talking about sort of from the January through to the May. People like Malik Carrigan, you know, Malik turned up on the day, and everyone's going, and they were really joyed because he's a lovely kid. If they're bad eggs, you're not going to bring them back, Burnsy. But the majority of them, of the changing room that I had, were really good lads, you know, really good kids. So they were supportive of their teammates. But I was also thinking, it's energy sapping. You go to a changing room like the one at Southport, and it squeezes 12 people in there. That's it, you know. We've got 25 in there. Excuse me.
We'll get to Wembley. We'll get to Southampton if it is Southampton, because I think we're all fascinated to know what you think about Spygate. Kathryn, questions for Phil? You got one? Sure you have.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask him when, you know, with his team, obviously, there's quite a lot of similarities to this whole City team in that, you know, you kept the team up the season before, you know, in the last couple of games. Obviously, City stayed up on goal difference last season. No one was predicting your team to challenge for promotion in the following year, and no one was predicting this team to challenge for promotion in the following year. Did that help you kind of being under the radar, do you think? And do you think it's helped this team as well?
I was looking at that, Kathryn. I was looking at the similarities to the season, and obviously you made reference to the previous season. I agree with that. And then we had a really, really poor start, if you remember rightly. I think it was 12, 13 games in. Burnsy's probably saying you shouldn't have been manager.
No, I wasn't.
But you know what I mean. We had a really poor start, and this was a guy, I'm talking about me now, that was fighting the chairman to get the job. I wasn't actually in all the way through, was I? You know, you get an opportunity as a caretaker, and then after Phil Parkinson, etc., etc. So I had to fight the manager, the owner at the time. I had to fight him to get the job. So was it 13 games, Burnsy? I can't remember. Was it 13 games in terms of
I'll check.
But I think it was about 12 or 13 games as a caretaker. Anyway, long story short, I get the job. And then we're walking around Cardiff, having won the game 1-0 and survived. And everybody's on the pitch and the fans are still there because it was a good turnout again. And I meet Paul Duffin for the first time. I see a guy that's in a grey suit. That wasn't a Hull City suit. And but he had a Hull City tie on. It's the first time I met Paul Duffin. And then the rest history, as it were. But the start of the season, I think Paul came in with the incumbent, you know, Russell Bartlett, etc., 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 and they took the pressure off me straight away. We don't expect Phil to get promoted to the Premier League, and you know we're giving him a 3-year plan. That's all well and good saying it, but the 3-year plan, when you're 12 games in and not a great start, or 13 games in and not a great start, it looked like it was going to be another relegation battle, and then we turned a massive corner and just started going at it. When we got to mid-table, I think I've said this a million times. We got to mid-table, all of a sudden Paul does an interview with Burnsy and comes out with, we think we could get in the playoffs this year. and straight away the bar's set 7th or 6th or whatever it was, and then you get to that stage where you're nearly there, and they're saying, you know, we haven't ruled out automatic promotion. So all of the pressure was building up towards the end of the season. And we managed to get to the top end of the playoffs, and they were expecting an automatic promotion. I think it was at Sheffield United we got beat away, and that's when, or was it Ipswich? I can't remember one of the games, but then we blew our chance of getting automatic promotion.
Ipswich,
yeah. Having looked at the way, obviously I look at all my clubs, all my old clubs, and it takes a long time on a Saturday now, but. I'm looking at the teleprinter, and I always look to see how Hull was doing, and I'm going, ooh, automatic promotion. Myself, I was thinking automatic promotion. Wow, that would be a hell of a turnaround from last season. And it was pushing for 3rd and possibly 2nd at times, but never in 1 minute did I think they were going to miss out on the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, the last 3 games of the season, I'm thinking, wow, look at Wrexham, because Phil Parkinson again being ex-Hull City manager, and then he brings me to Hull City. I've got Aidan Davison, that's there, Steve Parkin, that's there. So I've watched Wrexham's success, and it's been unbelievable over 3 or 4 years. And I'm thinking, could they nick into the last place with the momentum that they've got? But when Hull City did achieve it, I thought, that's it, job done. And I meant job done as in I always say we'll get promoted now. And what I saw on the Friday game, I thought, wasn't happy with it. What I saw on Monday, wow, I'm thinking 1,000,000%. Doesn't matter who we play, Southampton or Middlesbrough, doesn't matter who we play at Wembley. It's almost job done. But you can't think that way as a manager. You've got to go through the process, and the 2 weeks process or 10 days process of getting to the Premier League. There'll be so much clarity coming from the manager, from what I've seen on Monday night, than any training session I've ever done. But there was a lot of similarities. But at the same time, I thought City had a better chance of getting automatic promotion, and then they had a better chance of dropping out of the playoffs than what we did.
Just about, I mean, Phil's touched on it there. In theory, we still don't know whether it's Southampton or Middlesbrough or whatever. What's the latest as you understand it? And then we'll get Phil's thoughts on Spygate and Southampton.
Yeah, we're obviously recording this on Thursday afternoon, so things are still up in the air. But as we understand it, Hull City have put out a holding statement this morning, basically saying, look, thanks for your patience, but be patient. Because the ticket information hasn't come out. Southampton published their ticket information. The sale date's on Wednesday. The EFL told them to remove it, so they removed it. We're basically waiting for this independent panel that the EFL have brought in that are now looking at they're investigating. So kind of everybody's in the lap of the gods, but nothing's off the table. And when I say that, that means Southampton being removed from the playoffs, a points deduction next season, a fine, the game being postponed to a later date, which is obviously not ideal. And given Wembley's schedule over the summer months is really hard. But obviously that is because the independent panel will need their own time. It's a really difficult situation. I do feel for the EFL in this respect, because it's a situation that Southampton have brought on themselves, and the EFL have been landed with this, just hours before the first leg on Saturday at the Riverside Stadium. Middlesbrough understandably aren't happy. What kind of connotations does it have on clubs in the regular season that perhaps were implicated? Were they spied on? There's some suggestion that they were. Some training sessions from other clubs were watched. Now that has an implication. So it's a really difficult situation. Everybody understands that fans have got hotels booked, they've got time off work booked, people are flying from all over the world to come to the game. Tickets haven't gone on sale yet. We hope that they will at some point, but City kind of are in the dark to an extent. But I think Sergei Yakovich will be like, well, water off a duck's back. He said to me the other day, I don't understand why you do it. You've played these teams twice this season. You know everything there is to know. He's like, there's no secrets about how we play. If they want to come and spar on us, well, fine. I'm not really bothered. So I think they'll be fairly relaxed. It'll only be maybe kind of the back end of next week when they start to do shape and stuff based on Southampton. If it is going to be them, I think they'll work on the theory it is going to be Southampton. I would be astonished if they're booted out at this stage. But look, we'll have to wait and see. But it is, for me, it's taken the shine off the whole build-up. It should be a magical, exciting build-up for everybody. And what Southampton have done, and they're not denying it. So I just think it's a real shame. Brownie, as a manager, how would you be dealing with this if you're Yakirovic?
Very similar, very similar. You're saying it's taking the shine off. It's probably taking the shine off the EFL. It's probably taking the shine off the final, but it hasn't taken the shine off Hull City.
No.
And if you're going into that game as a shining example, that's what it is. It's a shining example of how to win how to win over two legs. Because the second leg was outstanding, having played poorly in the first leg. And if you're going to go to Spygate, what was said in that, I've got to keep saying it, the press room was rife with the changes. And I'm talking about an hour and a half, 2 hours before the game. So before team sheets are being issued. And you know what? Burnsy will be able to tell you, it's exactly the same. You've got to ask questions. You go around asking the press officers of them football clubs, and they obviously know what playing because they're the training ground every day. All of them things are your go-to questions of how do you think he's going to, he's got that one wrong, or he's got. But I think a way of dealing with it could possibly, if I'm sitting on that panel and it's independent, I've got to be looking at Middlesbrough and seeing how many games have they won or how many games have they gone ahead in the first 10, 15 minutes of a game, because that is the key moments of when you've got your You've got your planning and your preparation right. And if they've gone 1-0 up in the first 10, 15 minutes and gone on to win them games, does that accumulate the points total or the points deduction? Sorry, I'm talking about Southampton here. Does that accumulate the points deduction or points tally that you're going to take off them? There's all sorts of things that you've got to understand that can play into a tactical mind of an opposing manager, but also the players. But bottom line is, I think where Sergei is concerned, he said exactly, it's almost word for word what I would actually say. And that's the beauty of what Sergei's doing. He's got his own team prepared. Doesn't matter who comes out the changing room at Wembley. As far as I'm concerned, as long as he knows 2 or 3 days before, and that's all he wants to know.
What do you think is the appropriate punishment for Southampton, assuming they're guilty? And does that punishment differ, Phil, if somebody proves it's not just a one-off?
Well, isn't there a couple of clauses that relate to this that give you an evaluation of what the punishment should be? Is that not the case?
We discussed this yesterday, and none of us could come up with a definitive. The rules are a bit woolly as to what the punishments are.
Woolly or vague?
The rules are clear in the sense if you can be punished if you're found to be spying within 72 hours of the fixture. Those rules were brought in after the Leeds and Derby scenario a few years ago. So the rules are very clear. Where it gets a bit vague, the punishment is open, and because there's no precedent in terms of the punishment, it's only just happened. This is the first case since the rules were brought in. The punishment can be
wasn't the precedent set by a fine on Bielsa?
Yeah, that was brought in. He was fined, but there was no rules at that stage. So there's a rule 172 point whatever it is now states if you do it within 72 hours, you will get punished. You will be charged. The punishment is where it gets a little bit vague because essentially it starts at the bottom with a fine to a points deduction to a expulsion from the competition. So that's where the waters get a little bit muddied in terms of what can actually happen. So it's up to the independent panel to now decide, which is made up of QC, of lawyers and QCs, etc., of what actually happens. They have to determine whether it's a fine, whether it's a punishment by points deduction next season. If they do it this season, that creates all kinds of, if they retrospectively apply it to the league table, if it's found that other clubs have been spied on by Southampton in the regular season, they've got a case. And obviously, ultimately, the harshest would be to boot them out the playoffs. Yeah.
Is it same as the law? You're innocent until proven guilty.
You would imagine so, but Southampton they've not come out and denied it, have they? In their statements, in their interviews, they've not actually said we didn't do it. We just can't. All they've said is, well, we can't talk about it.
Again, all we're doing is talking about it, and the reason why we're talking about it because it's news. But as I say, where Sergei is concerned, I would have said exactly the same thing, and I'll be focusing on all my attention. Will he be on the training ground with the players at the moment, discussing that kind of issue, or does he ban that kind of talk? Or I think the players are. All I can say is I can draw a reference to what I watched on Monday night, and I'm drawing reference to a group of players that are focused, that understand the job in hand, and regardless of who you're playing, how many would have been watching the game the following night? I wouldn't have been watching it as a manager. Doesn't matter who they're playing, because in them tight situations, anything could happen, and systems go out the window. People's form goes out the window. Results before go out the window. All of these things are not even relevant. What's relevant is the pressure that you're under, and the ones who can handle it are the ones who will go through.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of talk earlier in the season, Brownie, about the former players of yours and people around Hull City were kind of talking about the similarities between Sergei Yakirovic's team of 2025-26 and Phil Brown's team that won promotion in 08. Can you understand why those similarities, both from yourself as the manager to the characters you'd got in the dressing room, the individual brilliance you'd got? We saw it on Monday night with Mo Balumi, that and obviously McBurney throughout the season as well. Can you understand why those comparisons have been made?
Yes, I can, and no at the same time, because I never want to steal anybody's thunder. Never been my style, never will be. I can always make reference to Hull City never should have sacked me, because I think I would have kept him in the Premier League. But that's history. It's a waste of time talking about it. But similarities to how I was feeling after the game. It took me so close to being back to the two-legged affair against Watford. And all I can do is, you guys, and I was thinking about the media, and I've been doing media for long enough now to understand that this wave of if you want to talk about Sky and the amount of money they put into the football world and the game, what are they paying for? They want to be in them 4 lanes, the 4 white lanes that make a football pitch. They want to be inside that as much as they possibly can. And it means all the media people, even the ones who have never played the game before, just want a moment of what we feel like as players, as coaches, as managers, in them moments where you've got the tactics right and you've got one over your counterpart, the manager that you're playing against, but also every player out there have took every word that you've said in terms of the preparation and took it literally and carried it out to the nth degree. And that's what the media have been dying to be able to give me a little feel of that, give me a little sample. A million words could come out my mouth on this podcast, and not one of them would have the feel that I felt on Monday night. Not one of them. And the feel I felt was down to a guy who I've never met, to a chairman who I don't know, and I met for the first time. I've never done a podcast with you guys before, and I've never done BBC Radio Humberside with Mike White before, but I've heard it a million times. But it's that moment when you cross the white line and you're a player, or you're a coach, or you're a manager, and you achieve something. It's difficult to explain it any other way than that. I felt very, very close to what Sergei would have been feeling, and I'm in a box 100 yards behind him, high up, watching Canary Wharf and an incinerator behind the Cold Blow Lane, and that's my life at the moment. Describing how the Hull City fans, London's calling. When the Clash came on, Burnsy knows I like my music. When the Clash came on, London's calling. I said Wembley's calling, and Wembley was calling. Wembley was calling for that group of players and for the Hull City fans, and you're there. And I just really can't explain how I felt. I didn't feel over-elated. I just felt 2008. I'm back to when I achieved what I achieved, and when we achieved what we achieved. And Burnsy's probably going back there now, because these words are emulating what I was probably saying at the time, how I was feeling. I was just floating. I was floating around the place. A great place. It's a great place to be. And what my daughter asked me, when are we moving to Hull? and I went, why are you saying that? He said, well, you've been to Hull and you were talking to the chairman. That means you're going to be the manager one day.
What was Phil, what was your impression of the owner? He's obviously very charismatic. He loves it. He's very, very involved. What obviously your first meeting of him with him, your first interaction, what did you get from him?
I got warmth. I got a vibe, a really good vibe. One that was similar to the Paul Duffin situation, where Paul came in, he was a foreigner, in Hull. And everybody found out that he was a Spurs fan and all this kind of stuff. And, I think Russell Bartlett was a West Ham fan. And what are these Londoners doing up here? But they quickly became Hull people because of the amount of money that they pumped in and the way they ran the club. And I just thought that Paul had a warm heart for the Hull people. And I think, Ajun's got the same. He couldn't wait to tell me what was going on and the relationship that he's having with Ajun and how it worked. And all I'm doing is making reference to it. When I got outside, apart from cap down, ducking for cover, waiting for a Millwall fan to be coming out the alleyway, but thousands of coppers still very active. Ajun was down there already. He probably just wanted to hug everybody. He just wanted to meet all the Hull City fans and thank them for the support. And at that moment, when I just walked straight for him, and I tapped him on the shoulder because he was spinning on people and shaking hands and this, that, yeah. I tapped him on the shoulder and shook his hand. And I went, "Well done, see you at Wembley." and he didn't have a clue who I was. No idea, no idea who I was. But we'd only just met, so I understand that, you know. But honestly, it was just a great night. It's just a fabulous night, and I hope he's still up there. I hope he's still on the ceiling, because he looked like he was on the ceiling when I met him after the game.
Kathryn?
So was I. I was on the ceiling as well. It took me back to 2008 a little bit, because I'd have been 11 for that that final in 2008, and I remember when I was growing up, like, the idea of Hull being in the Premier League was just, it felt impossible, because all my friends at school were all Man United or Liverpool fans and all
Rubbish.
And as soon as Phil got us to Wembley, there was people coming out of the woodwork going to Wembley who had never been to the stadium before. And I think that 2008 playoff final was, it was so special, I think, to so many people, because I don't think fans had ever dreamed of the possibility. And when Steve Bruce did it a few years later, I think there was more of an expectation on that team to get the job done. Whereas in 2008, it felt like, Hull and Bristol, there was not too much to choose between. Maybe because we finished higher up the table, people thought we might do it, but it wasn't like we were overwhelming favourites. And then this time around, it'll be the opposite, because I imagine, assuming it is Southampton, that they will be the fancied team probably to win, and we've been the unfancied team throughout. So it just felt, it just felt so special on Monday night, and it took me back to 2008 a little bit, and you remember why all those kind of those early starts, all the travel to games and things like that. It reminds why you go through those low moments, because football can bring you such amazing highs as well.
Very well put, Kathryn. Very well put. But 11-year-old, wow.
I couldn't drink at 11-year-old, but I can drink now. That's how I manage my my nerves a little bit more. I remember it was a really, really scorching hot day, and having to put sun cream on so I didn't get burnt, because we were sat behind the goal and the sun was kind of blaring in. So yeah,
I've got a picture that I've got 40,000, whatever there was, 40,000 Hull City fans behind me, and I was in that technical area, and I was on my own, and Brian and Steve, one of them moments where Brian and Steve weren't there, and it gave you that feeling of how lonely it is to be a manager. Because even though you've got 40,000 supporting you, you're on your own. You're standing there on your own. Got to make decisions that will affect 40,000 people. And if you make the wrong ones, it'll affect me and my family. And the 40,000 people will quickly be down my throat, as it were, But the level of support was just fabulous. It really was. It was nothing short of brilliant. And I think that's why we survived in the Premier League. I always tell this a little story, because I got to know quite a few people in Hull, and one in particular, the Duke of, I sometimes get this wrong. Was it the Duke of Cumberland in North Ferriby?
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about an actual Duke, landed gentry, and you're referring to the boozer. You moved in those sort of circles as well, Phil.
100%. That was my local though, and I always remember I had my family at a home game, and we were living in North Ferriby, so we stopped off at the Duke for a bite to eat on the way home, and a couple of pints, as it were. And I've gone in there, and there's this disgruntled Hull fan there. And he's from the old brigade that used to go to Boothbury Park on certain nights of the week and start a small riot, as it were. A bit of a thug. They call them ultras these days. They were a crew back in them days. They were whatever. Anyway, he came and he came up to me, right in my face, and started having a pop. Well, I had my family with me, so I defended, and he completely, and I mean completely, about turned. He went, "You don't realise what you're." I'm just joking. I was just winding you up there. He said, "You don't realise what you've given us." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We can now walk into places like West Ham, like Everton, like places that we couldn't even match in terms of the crews, the firms against each other. We can walk in there with our heads held high, and we can have a proper scrap if we need to, because you're because you're giving us the right to, because of the way we're playing football."
Wow.
I just couldn't believe what I was listening to. But that's, the levels of support 11-year-old going to Wembley and first time and then going all them games in the Premier League. And that's what makes you fall in love with the team. And it's just brilliant how you fall in love with football clubs. You know, I was dragged to St James's Park to try and support Newcastle. For some reason, I never liked black and white. I was red and white. I went to Sunderland. My mother took me to Sunderland, 1973 Cup final. I'm sold. So all of them reasons are the reasons why the reason why I had success, and it's relative, but I had success at Hull, was down to one fact, one reason and one reason only. I've said this to you many a times, Bernie, is because I understood the supporters. I felt as if I was one of them, and I understood what they wanted. They wanted a return, and hard work was the first thing on the agenda. If your team's not working hard enough, forget about it. We won't come and support you. But then you've got the pride in performance, so you've got to go in for a challenge and come out with the ball. And then you've got to be able to play. So you've got to get the three in its priority, you know. But the first one was hard work. Second one was commitment. Third one was play.
When you talk about those things there, are they exactly the sort of traits you saw on Monday night?
Aye. Oh, that's exactly where I'm going, Barry. That's exactly where I'm going. I didn't know I was going to come out with them three, but that's exactly what I saw. And that's really why I was feeling warm inside. I was purring with the success. And when the guy swipes at Mike, and he's a Millwall fan, but he's suited and booted in the director's box, I'm thinking, that's what you're going to come up against in the Premier League, week in and week out. You know, people that are really committed to the cause, but they can play as well. Whereas Millwall just haven't got that part right, you know. When it comes down to playing, every so often, I thought in the first half, Aziz had the right mentality. He was getting at, was it... he was going at Ryan Giles, wasn't he?
Ryan Giles, yeah.
And he was getting at him, coming back on his left foot, putting unbelievable crosses in. But that died. So Giles has won the battle, you know, and I'm a fullback by trade. You've got to win that battle. But the kid was capable of putting it in on his left foot, but he could check on his right foot. And he also had Ryan Leonard, who I had at Southend, who's never a fullback, in my opinion. He's a midfield player, coming past him. So he really was under the cosh. And that's where I think Kathryn was making reference to. You know, they had a couple of good chances and a couple of great deliveries in the first half. And it goes 1-0. My opening line on the show was the first one to score wins it.
Yeah. The
first one to score wins it. That was so important on Monday night. And unfortunately, you had a goalkeeper that was bang at it. You had a back five that was bang at it. And a team that was, I'm not even going to say misfiring. Millwall were playing their part in the first half, but that first goal just sapped the energy right out of them.
Just finally, because I know we've taken up an hour of your time, Phil. How proud will you be to see this football club back at Wembley, going for a place in the Premier League after a decade out, all the troubles of the embargo and injuries, surviving on the last day of last season by Crooks' goal at Millwall? To be in this position is testament to the work that Adjon and Jared and the staff behind the scenes and the gaffer and the players ultimately, because they're the ones that have got to go out and play and deliver, aren't they?
I had a sniff. I call it a scratch and sniff exercise, Burns. You'll know what I'm talking about, where you go in behind enemy lines, if you like. But when I got invited to do the lounges on the day that we were supposed to play Watford, first week in January, and then the game got cancelled 15 minutes before kickoff. But I was already doing the lounges, so I finished up by keep on doing the lounges until half time. And there was a lot of supporters stayed there, you know. And I'm talking to a team. I'm talking to a group of supporters that have come expecting to watch a game of football, and they're not getting a game of football. They're getting an ex-manager talking to them. But that was the buy-in that I still had from the Hull City fans, which was priceless in my opinion. But what I did that night, because I stayed in the hotel on the night before, I scratched and sniffed, and I went around the city, and I looked around the place. What was changed, what had changed. I went into Cottingham. I went to the training ground. It was like going back, how many years? Nearly 20 now. It was like going back in time for me, but bumping into people and they're looking at me twice, you know, because I've aged, of course, and they're looking at me twice going, I recognise the accent. You're from the Northeast? Yeah. Actually, I recognise the face, you know. And then just spending a bit of time with people. Next thing you know, it's Brownie's in town, and you know, I'm working at the game. The whole part of it for me was my time at Hull was 5 years. It was 5 years well spent in my career, and I learned a lot from it. And I hope the whole City fans learned a lot from me. But you know, I think the club has moved on since then, and obviously the stadium, the training ground, and this, that, and the other. But the people remain the same, and that's the most important part of Hull. And long may that continue.
Absolutely. Kathryn, final word?
Oh, no, just Phil's a legend. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Kathryn. I really appreciate
Burnsy.
that. And I'm thanking you, but you've got to thank me for you being a Hull City fan. I hope I've not caused you too much problem.
Burnsy was before. We can't go without mentioning this, Brownie. Burnsy was regaling the tale yesterday of when you banned him and then unbanned him with a meal.
He was a tough cookie, man. I'm telling you, he was always asking the right questions, and now I know that you were always asking the wrong questions as a manager, but as a media guy, you were always asking the right questions.
I've one final question for you, and I've loved hearing you today. No, seriously, just seriously, what would be your top tip to Sergei or to the squad ahead of Wembley and a playoff final at Wembley? Is there a top tip?
Very well put. I'll answer it the same way I answer questions from young coaches that ask me what would be my top tip to them. So a young coach could be 22, 23-year-old, and he's decided to go into coaching, whatever. What advice would you give? And this is what I would give to any manager, any player, any coach, whatever. Be yourself. End of story.
Brown, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I'm on the school run.
Being yourself.
So I was false when I was.
No, you weren't.
No.
No.
I really was. That was one of the.
That's the thing.
That was one of the clubs where I really was myself.
Well, exactly. And I don't really know Sergei that well, but he comes across in the same way, and I felt the same way about Steve Bruce as well. Like you were blokes you could go for a pint with, and I think the support felt that, and I think that makes a difference.
Not just one, Burnsy, unless you're buying, of course. Right, it's a pleasure. I've got to go on the school run. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thanks, Brownie.
A week Sunday.
Cheers,
week
Brownie.
Saturday. Is it week Saturday?
Week Saturday.
Week Saturday. I'll
See you then.
All the best, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.